Hey, Ricardo. Yeah, Vikings cornerback Xavier Rhodes has made a living off of shutting down the opposing team's top wide receiving threat. You would have assumed that's what would have happened the last time that the Vikings played the Saints, but it wasn't the case. Michael Thomas will get Xavier Rhodes undivided attention this time, and Rhodes wasn't going to give him any bulletin board material.
Michael Thomas has always been good, so nothing changed about him. I mean, this man been consistent with the catches and touchdowns and yards. I'm not making a name for myself. I'm making a name. We're making a name. The Vikings, we're going out each and every day. We're going to go on that field, try to make a name for the defense. And we try to make a name for the offense, try to make a name for the Vikings, period. Let them know that we're on the road, trying to get to the same position, the same place everybody else is trying to get to that's in the playoff, and that's the Super Bowl. So we just going to go out there and play our game, be aggressive, do what we do each and every week since week one. So, I mean, go from there.
In Thomas' sophomore season, he had his second straight 1,000-yard receiving season, but Rhodes has been an eraser against some of the top wide receivers in the NFL, Antonio Brown, A.J. Green, Julio Jones. He held that trio to just 9 catches, 116 yards, and 0 touchdowns combined. That's going to be a tough matchup for Michael Thomas tomorrow. In Minneapolis, Andrew Doak, Eyewitness Sports.
All right, Andrew, that matchup will... And Andrew Doak joins us live now at the Mall of America in Minneapolis so he can feel his hands with the Vikings' plan for stopping the Saints. Hey, Andrew.
Definitely can feel my hands. Look, when I was in the Vikings locker room a little bit earlier today, I spoke to their all-pro cornerback, Xavier Rhodes. I asked him, what did you see against Drew Brees that led him to be so successful against the Panthers? He sort of looked at me sideways, said, he's a Hall of Famer. What more is there to say? That's probably just the best way to explain how he's playing at this elite level. The New Orleans Saints are 2 wins away from coming right back here to Minneapolis for the Super Bowl. Windows close in sports just as they close in life. But last Sunday in New Orleans, Drew Brees showed the window is certainly still open. And Vikings strong safety Andrew Sendejo may have put it best.
He's good.
He was being himself. He was playing like Drew Brees, making great throws, throwing his guys open. I mean, there's nothing more to say about that. You know, he'll just be in the Hall of Famer.
Brees hasn't been asked to do it like he has in seasons past. This season, the gunslinger from Texas has had his fewest passing attempts, yards, touchdowns, and interceptions per game than any other of his 12 years with the Saints. And Sunday, when the Panthers sold out on Kamara and Ingram, the Vikings knew Carolina had poked the wrong bear.
We just had extra attention, maybe too much attention, because you know they kind of got beat over the top a couple times. So it's going to be a team effort. You know, it's not one guy stopping one guy.
If the team's stopping the run, he's going to try to find a way to make it work in the air. So, like I said, you know, we'll have our hands full all over, you know, run and pass game. So it'll be a good challenge for us.
And Vikings defensive tackle Tom Johnson, who spent 3 seasons of an up-and-down career with the Saints, saw firsthand what they expect to see from one of the greatest of all time in the divisional round.
I know that Drew's a very competitive guy, you know. He's a guy that you know is going to give you 100% every day. He's one of those guys that really, you hear people say, first guy in, last guy to leave. He's literally first guy in, last guy to leave, trying to do everything. So you know, it's going to be a heavy task.
Doug, you never know how many years Drew Brees has left. Of course, there's even been talk about his contract situation to see if he re-signs in New Orleans, which he said he wants to next year. But the way he's playing right now, there's no doubt they got a good shot.
Yeah, no question about it. And if you look at him, I think he's got at least 2 or 3 more years the way he's playing now. All right, after talking to the Vikings for a couple of days, what do you think, Andrew?
They're loose. They are very loose. I think if you're the Vikings, at least from my perspective, what you would worry about is not being in rhythm after a bye week. But they were very loose around the locker room. They're excited to get out there and give a little bit of payback to the Saints after that 2009 NFC Championship loss. And that's all the media has talked about around here as well. Doug.
Andrew Doak has spent the past 5 days in the frozen north. Andrew joins us live from Minneapolis. Andrew, how would you describe the mood in the locker room afterwards?
Well, Doug, Marcus Williams fell to his knees when he was walking to the Saints locker room. When we walked in the locker room, he had his head in his hands. His eyes were all red. You could tell he'd been crying. He bit the bullet. He talked to the media. He said, this was my play to make, and I didn't make it. And maybe the toughest pill to swallow outside of the Saints feeling like they knew they had a Super Bowl type team was if Marcus Williams makes that tackle of Stephon Diggs inbounds, the clock would have expired and the Saints would be moving on instead of Minnesota.
You gotta keep his head up, man. I know, I'm not gonna say, he's not feeling bad about, the play or whatever, but, we got his back. When we're young, man, we're trying to come back next year, hopefully get the job done, but Marcus is a special player.
It was just a good play by them, It's a good play, and, congrats to them. Bro, it's too soon.
I'm a warrior, and I left everything that I had on the field, and I've got no regrets. At the end of the day, everything that I had on the field I thought was going to be enough. I'll dig deeper and become better.
If it seemed unprecedented, it is because it was. Case Keenum to Stephon Diggs was the first time in a postseason game that they've had a walk-off touchdown to end in a win for a team to move on, and it was just an unbelievable finish here. Obviously not going the Saints' way, but here in Minneapolis, Andrew Doak, Eyewitness Sports. We'll have more coming up in 4th Down on 4. Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Good stuff. Certainly a tough way to end. Andrew Doak joins us live at US Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. Andrew, we're still trying to figure out what we saw. Well, how would you describe the reaction there?
Bedlam. That was one of the toughest locker rooms I've probably ever walked into in my life. And when you talk with the Saints players, it was because they knew what they had. I kind of joked with our photographer, Adam Ney. Brees probably wanted the Vikings to score that last field goal before he went down and marched with a game-winning drive. What it seemed like at the time, with 1:29 left on the clock, he was silly good. Surgical precision. The 4th and 10 conversion to Willie Snead. Ice was in his veins. And when Will Lutz knocked through that 43-yarder, I don't think there was a person in the building that didn't think that Drew Brees just won that game until he didn't.
Drew's one of the greatest of all time, and as a lineman, all you have to think is, hey, just give him time, and he's going to make something happen, and he did. He let us down within range, and just so automatic with everything he does, and it's just great to have that type of person in commanding the field. So we're absolutely confident that we're going to go down there and score.
And when Diggs scored on his 61-yard walk-off touchdown, the players were probably more surprised than anyone in the building. And why it stung so much, Ted Ginn probably put it best. You can never guarantee that you'll be in this position again.
You always know that the team ain't going to be the same next year, and that's kind of like the biggest deal. So you try to get it done with the guys that you have in the locker room right now, and we had a handful of guys here, man, that knew what we wanted to do and how we wanted to get it done, no matter if they was playing or not. And, we just got to just get back to that.
You always hear, there's still time left on the clock. The game's not over until the whistle blows and it's all zeros on the end. And that's what happened.
Whenever you talk to me, I'm always a firm believer that, everything is for your good, for your own good. No matter what it is, positive or negative, it's always for your own good. The wins obviously are going to give you confidence. The losses, they're going to teach you a great lesson.
And no doubt they have a young core here. The Saints feel like the future is bright. Our office probably had the mouse over the tickets to go to Philadelphia next weekend. Still a little bit shell-shocked, but about an hour ago we caught up with Cox Sports' Mike Neighbors to break this all down. Joined now by Mike Neighbors, CST Saints reporter. I'm a little bit shell-shocked after this game. Drew Brees admitted he was a little bit shell-shocked. It's going to take a while for this one to sink in. What were you thinking on the Saints' final offensive drive? It looked like Drew Brees had another vintage comeback performance. It seemed like the Saints had kind of put this in the bag.
Well, if you believe in destiny, you thought the Saints would win this game. We've seen it over and over again with this football team. You go back to the Redskins game, the way they have made plays. Taysom Hill blocks a kick to set up a score. And then when he completed the 4th and 10 pass to Willie Snead, I thought they'll run the clock out, which basically they did, and kicked the field goal. And Drew Brees even said after the game, when you're up with 25 seconds left, you usually win football games.
No doubt about it. I mean, look, it had moments this season where it just felt like when things would break the Saints' way, that's what you got to have sometimes in a championship season. Drew Brees, obviously a free agent after this season, he kept mentioning a window that he feels like he can still win a Super Bowl with the Saints. When he was asked if he sees that future happening here in New Orleans, he said, I do. How much more time do you feel like he has?
I think it'll take care of itself. I know I talk to Drew Brees quite often after games, and he's told me he and Mickey Loomis have had good dialogue during the offseason. They didn't want it to be a distraction during the season, and it hasn't been. So I think it's kind of that written, that handshake under the table. They're going to work it out. Drew Brees had a great year. I know his numbers were down, but they were down back to the 09 season, which turned out pretty good for the Saints. So I think Drew Brees will be back in New Orleans next
And
year.
these last 2 games, I mean, he stepped up to an elite level to play the way he was whenever they took certain things away offensively. Look, Marcus Williams, his hand was in his head, or his head was in his hands after that game. I mean, the guy was crying. He went for the money shot on Stephon Diggs, and he got burned. But a big sequence in the game was after that Michael Thomas touchdown. He has the interception, and if you don't get that, who knows where this game goes. But he had a lot of big plays in this game, and he's only a rookie. I mean, he has such a high ceiling ahead of him.
This 2017 rookie class, you can make a case best in NFL history. Marcus Williams a part of it. You'll likely have the offensive and defensive rookies of the year, which has only happened one other time in NFL history. He's part of it. I know it's a tough play, but there's a lot more positive than negative on his resume.
You always wonder, are we going to be as healthy as we were this year? Or Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram going to have the same season that they had? Is Drew Brees going to have the season that he had? And sometimes when you get around 40, it turns off. Do you feel like a window's still there for this team with this nucleus that they can get a break their way maybe next year and still have another opportunity?
No doubt about it. I mean, the last 3 years you're coming off a 7-9 season. You don't know if Sean Payton's going to be back. You have questions about Drew Brees. This time around, they win the division. They win a playoff game. Really should have won 2 playoff games. The bulk of this team is a young football team. You had over 10 players in injured reserve. This will be a good football team moving forward. I think you feel better about the Saints team than you have in 4 years.
Absolutely, you feel better about this Saints team. I mean, look, it wasn't the season that they wanted, to finish the way that it did, but still a really good run this year. Here in Minneapolis, Andrew Doak. Doug, I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, and Andrew, look, I got a lot of response on Twitter tonight. I listed all the Saints players who are 26 and younger. There's like 16 of them, and several people responded, but Drew Brees makes 39 tomorrow. How long do you think, from watching him, seeing what he looks like, the kind of condition he's in, how long do you think number 9 can go?
I still think he's got at least a few more years. I'm a San Antonio Spurs fan, and watching Tim Duncan when he got to 40, I mean, it went really, really quick. But watching that final drive tonight was a thing of beauty from Drew Brees. I mean, that showed you right there, this guy's got stuff left in the tank, and that's what gives you hope for the future. He's got at least 1, 2, maybe even 3 years left. I don't know if he's going to make it to 45 like he wants to, but I think legitimately 40, 41, 42 could be a possibility.
I agree with you completely, and I also think the Saints are closer to getting to a Super Bowl with here, and he knows that, than going someplace else, which is why I don't think there's any doubt he's back here. But when you look at those guys under 26, 4 starting offensive linemen, that's Armstead, Warford, Pete, Ramczyk, all under 26, all under contract, 5 DBs, that's Lattimore, P.J. Williams, Crawford, Von Bell, and Marcus Williams, all under 26. And those are position groups where it's hard to find guys. To me, that's where the nucleus of this team starts, right?
And when it comes to Mickey Loomis and Jeff Ireland, even Sean Payton, the job that they've done over the draft and free agency, it's put them in position to be able to win. And maybe if Drew Brees had a season, another 7-9 season, maybe he would legitimately be looking somewhere else. But because of that potential, and not even just potential, because of the result that you saw in the talent with the players that they have, that they've brought in, particularly through the draft, that's why Drew Brees wants to be here in New Orleans and why the future's still bright.
Future's still bright, and it's bright immediately. Good stuff, Andrew. We are back with more 4th Down on 4 in a minute.